Here we go. Back for another episode. Episode 19, closing in on the big 2-0. Never thought I would do one, so I'm going to call 20 pretty good. But I went on the road this last week. You'll never guess what I was doing. That's right. I was hunting. Hunting with the guy responsible, I'm going to call him single-handedly responsible for my infatuation with this sport and activity and passion and pursuit. The one and only John Dudley. We got invited to go down to Georgia, Dudley County, Georgia specifically, for a type of hunting that I have no experience with, and that is probably one of the reasons I was so excited to go. I've hunted in Canada, which had some varied terrain and very varied, great combination of words there, foliage and scrub brush and trees and elevation. Then came back home to Montana, obviously a western state, mountain ranges running through it, north to south. You got to deal with some elevation, and then to Park City, Utah. I think our base altitude hunting there was 7,000 feet, maybe. Could even actually have been higher. So Georgia, base elevation where we were, I would guess 2 feet, but wide open, flat terrain, flat ground, and actually spent my first few days up in a tree stand, which is a substantially different experience for those of you who haven't hunted than being on the ground, trying to be sneaky, moving around with your ninja booties on. So it was a great trip, learned quite a bit, tried to pick Dudley's brain a little bit on tips for or strategies for people getting into hunting just starting off, because I will be the first person to admit that I'm extremely early in my hunting journey. I'm actually only a few months into this. And people are actually hitting me up with questions, and I don't feel qualified to answer them. So I try to pick the master's brain here a little bit. And with that, though, if you have questions about archery or shooting, target shooting, hunting, bow setup, any of that stuff, you need to check out Dudley's podcast. It's on all the places you can find podcasts, but it's called Knock On. And the wealth of knowledge stuck between that guy's ears is unbelievable. He'll do a Instagram live, or just he'll reach out and he'll get a bunch of questions from the internet and just goes through them and just hammering through knowledge and information. So if you're in the same place that I'm at, or if you're in front of me or behind me, wherever you may be, if you want to increase your knowledge game when it comes to hunting, go check it out. So let's get into it. Hunting from Georgia with the one and only John Dudley.
Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun run, north to south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
I know, I was going to say we should stop meeting like this, but I think we have to keep meeting like this. We'll go the opposite route.
At what point did that stupid thought come in your head? We should stop meeting like this? Every man should meet like this. Should meet where there's fresh meat, blood, weapons, coffee, grills,
Booze.
oh god, booze. Yeah, this is the ultimate place for us to meet. That's where everyone should meet. Should have a national man convention at a hunting cabin every year.
Where you dedicate time to doing awesome stuff.
Yeah, we just sort it out.
Yeah.
Everyone just sorts it out. We have like Brad Pitt there to do some street fighting.
I'm sorry. We're going to have
Just
to
kidding.
rewind here just a second. Brad Pitt to do street fighting? That's not going to work.
Fight club action.
Yeah. We can hit up Joe for some people who can do the street fighting.
I got people that can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know people.
Where exactly are we? Georgia, obviously. Are we in southern Georgia?
Listen, I have no idea. I couldn't even tell you.
Hunter, you're now
We
involved
flew-
in the podcast. Where exactly are we?
I'm going to switch this to Caleb.
Vienna, I think.
Caleb, where are we?
Dudley County, Southwest Georgia.
Dooley County, Southwest
Southwest
Georgia.
Georgia.
So about geographically as far as we can get from the last place you and I hunted together,
It
which
is,
was
too.
super northwest Alberta. So we've, I wouldn't say we've circled the globe, but we're stretching out the distance as far as we can possibly go.
We stretched this way, and then now we're going to stretch that way.
Yeah. You want to talk?
Actually, after we stretch that way, then we almost need to stretch down to like Australia.
But we could also swing it up to maybe something in Europe. Hard to say. We got to
Yeah.
go across the pond.
Well, we're going.
We are going.
Yeah, we're going up high, people.
What do you think?
wingsuit area.
What do you think the altitude's going to be? The elevation where we're going to go hunt. We're going to hunt in France for people who have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're gonna go hunt in the French Alps. We're gonna hunt up in snowpack country, way up. We're gonna go after some chamois, or as we're gonna call them in American terms, we call them ShamWows. Andy and I.
Yep.
And we're gonna hopefully find a place to stretch out the wingsuit. We're gonna be trying to build a cool little camp up at maybe 12, 15,000 feet. I don't know. It's going to be up there, buddy.
15,000 feet?
I don't know. We're going way up. Like from what I saw, it is up there, man.
I'm going to have to do a little bit of research because I don't know if I'm comfortable in a sleeping bag at 15,000 feet. I'm going to need some blood thinners before we go that high.
I'm getting in there with you.
It's perfect. I ordered that hammock anyway, so we'll just share the same hammock.
The rule that I was given up in moose camp one time when it got real frosty, and I think Ben.
Yeah.
Ben O'Brien, did you see the post he made about that time when they were stranded on Kodiak and they all kind of had to pack in one tent to stay warm enough to wait for the plane?
Yes.
Well, I've been in that situation in moose camp, and my guide told me, he said there's one rule: pole to pole or hole to hole, but never pole to hole. Like
that's actually the rule that we went with in the teams as well. It's
Okay.
totally fine.
Yeah, that's a great rule.
Yeah, it works too. It makes you much more comfortable. Do you know if are we going to be tent camping? Like in the snowbanks?
I think I think at least as our base camp, we're going to try to find an old trapper's cabin, like an old cabin up there, I think is going to be our base, and then we'll figure it out from there. So it's going to be epic. I mean, from what I've saw, it's cool, and I don't know. I'm to the point now where I want to try things that are totally outside of my realm, and then try to hash it out. I think that's what really makes an adventure. And I don't know, especially with some of the brands that the two of us are like affiliating with right now, and we're kind of we're kind of merging together because so many of our directions are paralleling one another.
Yeah.
I just think it's the perfect trip.
What exactly is a ShamWow?
It's a
Is it a goat?
It's a goaty looking thing.
A goatee looking.
And they also have some really cool, they've got mouflon there, which I showed you those. That's a really cool sheep. I really wanted to hunt those in Hawaii when I was down there. And it just got so wet that they didn't want to take any vehicles up on the hill at that time.
They're living in Hawaii as well, so they can live in that super hot, humid, and also the altitudes of the Alps.
I think any goat or sheep they're really diverse in what they can acclimate to. I mean, I've been down in far southern Texas, almost at the Mexico border, and seen like Barbary sheep just like wild on hillsides, and they just look miserable on like 4 foot of fur or wool.
Sweating it out.
Sweating it out. It's like freaking Tyler in that onesie just walking around a hill. But
there are things I'll never forget in my life, and that onesie is one of them for sure.
That was so funny. God, did we laugh hard about that story.
Yes, indeed. So this, I'm interested to see the type of hunting we do in France, because I started in Alberta with you.
Yep.
Walking all over the place, right? And then here we are. We're not walking all over the place. Yesterday was my first time ever in a tree stand, so I learned how to put it up. So let's just say different type of hunting for sure. Totally flat. Mm-hmm. And then France is going to be steep angles.
Not flat.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm really interested to check out the difference in the terrain, to try to go through like the whole spectrum.
Yeah, you are literally going head first into the bow hunting world, and having to learn, especially once we go there, you're going to have to learn some extremely technical archery, because just like what you learn in sniper school, ballistic cuts is
Angles
math. It's math, and with a bullet, the math is, I don't want to say it's less important, but you have a way larger margin of error with archery equipment because it's so much slower.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's zipping through the air so fast with the bullet.
Your arc is way more with an arrow. So there's a good chance we're going to be making shots with 40-degree cuts and stuff, to where you really have to You know, you really have to learn math, have good angle compensation. I've got a good rangefinder with angle compensation, but
Mine actually has it too.
I'll probably still bring my inclinometer on the side of my rangefinder. I'll
Really?
put the inclinometer and I've got like a laminated scale that I stick to the outside.
Which will show you your cut based off of the
it's probably
angle?
the same thing you had on your sniper rifle butts. I'm sure it's all just, degree of angle up and downhill and cut percentage.
You know, a lot of the
based.
times it was similar to the rangefinders now. Like when I was going online, before I think I had ever hunted, I was just looking at archery rangefinders.
Yep.
And there was one that said it compensates. You can get the true distance, you could get the shooting distance, like the variety of different numbers. I just got the one that gave me the most options, and that's kind of the lasers that we're using for precision rifle stuff most of the time. I mean, guys aren't out there doing trig because we're too dumb to. So they're sitting there pushing a button, and it just spits them out their shooting distance. And we do have cards where I had a card on the inside of my buttstock, and you just look, and you're like, there's the distance. And the biggest one was the wind, though.
Yeah.
The lateral holds, which is so far from a science. It's a complete art
That's
form.
experience. I mean, and that's one thing, like with me, when it comes to archery, I talked about a shot that I had to make one time. I'm not going to discuss it on here, but a shot that I had to make one time that was pretty unrealistic from archery's terminology. But the thing is, if you shoot bow enough, or if you shoot archery, or if you shoot guns, like especially guys that are really geeked out about guns and rounds and ballistics, especially people that learn a certain ballistic enough times, I think you really start to just understand what that ballistic and what the math can be on that particular projectile. Same is true with archery. That's why I don't really like to change like my arrows multiple times throughout. A lot of times I'll stick with the same arrow for several seasons, because I'll really go out and I'll shoot on days where I have a 10-mile-an-hour drift or a 15-mile-an-hour drift.
Yeah.
And I'll shoot at different distances to understand what that is. And then I'll also try to start to learn how much I need to bubble in order to, cant my bow and kind of put English on the arrow, so to speak, to put it in there in different wind conditions. So if you start shooting a heavier arrow or a fatter arrow or a thinner wall arrow, like all those different types of arrows or weights,
They're all going to fly differently.
they're all going to fly different. So, that's where experience and practice comes in, like where people really want to know, well, how do you shoot in the wind? You need to learn that, because, your speed you're a shorter draw length than me. Your arrow is going to be a little bit slower.
Yeah.
Your wind drift is going to be different than mine. Plus your projectile is shorter. You have a shorter shaft than I have. Mine's as long as they come.
Okay. You're maxed out.
I'm maxed out. Yep.
Sitting here, I'm like, okay, you just teed that up on a softball. I should swing for the fences, but we're going to let it fly. Yeah, and there's a difference, I have found at least, between understanding the ballistics and then experiencing the ballistics. Like, you can read about it in books all day long, like rifle marksmanship, and because there's other stuff at distance too, like spin drift.
Yeah.
Just the fact that the round is spinning in a clockwise manner, it starts eating to the right, so you have to learn to compensate for that. And looking at a ballistics chart that's near a rifle, and like, all right, I guess that makes sense. And then seeing the conditions and being able to take that shot and actually watch your round arc, you're like, okay. And no amount of reading makes you confident doing that. Like if you haven't shot in the wind, you're probably going to be screwed. If the shot comes up in the wind, you have to go out and practice.
I think that's why I haven't put a book out there yet, because I really enjoy teaching archery on immediate response. Like I love doing, for me, live feeds have just completely played into my wheelhouse, because it lets me show what my expertise is. I can just field a question and immediately reply.
You go for long ones too.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I mean, the information coming out of there, but like you're cranking out like 2-hour live feeds.
I think like for me, a book just, it doesn't give the true experience to where you can get as in depth. And I think I would rather do it and learn by doing more than reading. And I think maybe it's just because that's more my learning style. I've never been able to read something without having to a minute later go back and read the same page again, or
I have
read
to do the same
page.
thing.
And it's just like, holy cow, I've read it 3 times now. I still haven't got it. I'm just going to go out and and do it, or if I watch like a video, like a how-to YouTube video, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it.
But I think the reading is only part of like the learning arc, though. And like you had it, but I see people who will take the reading and then they go try to apply absent the practice, and then they have, you know, the Grand Canyon sitting in between them, and they're trying to broad jump it, and they don't understand why they're going in face first.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. What are you talking about? You're leaning your bow. How does that put English on the on the arrow?
So the arrow will always start to go the direction that your top limb is leaning. So
Okay.
if you're like leaning your top of your bow is leaning to the left, which you're bubbling to the right.
Yep.
So we've got a level on our sight, and you can use that level to actually cant the bow. And, you know, so like I'll learn, like say in a 10-mile-an-hour wind, like when I was shooting back when I shot competition, at 70 meters, I knew that like for my particular setup, half of a bubble in like a 10-mile-an-hour crosswind would be all I'd need to still aim gold
Yeah.
without
Oh,
having
okay.
to aim off.
So you're
Because we don't have
yeah.
mill dots. Like we don't have horizontal and vertical mill dots like you did.
No,
so,
it's all imaginary holding.
right.
It's
So
estimation.
by canting your bow, you're leaning your pin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you're leaning your pin out, and then so you're almost.
It allows you to aim point of impact.
Right.
That makes total sense instead of trying to, okay, I'm going to need to start practicing that.
But there comes a point where you have to, you don't want to be laying full bubbles over to where like your
Shooting
arrows
LA
coming
style?
up. Yeah. If you shoot it, if you're going gangster style with the horizontal Glock action, then yeah, that's not going to work on a bow. But for light drifts, it's easy to throw. Like I'm just, there's times where I've been out west, like for that antelope that I shot. I forget what it was. I think it was. Do you remember how far it was? I don't remember.
The antelope
Yeah, the one I shot last month.
in Montana?
Yeah, was it 74?
It was in the high 70s, yeah.
Maybe it was 78.
You're talking about the cow herd? The
Yeah.
cow herd? Yeah.
Yeah, that one, there was a pretty good little clip coming across. So I actually, with that, I was just looking at like the rain because it was raining. So I was just looking at the rain slant.
Yeah.
I've used like floaters, like if there's ever milkweed pods or like dogwood pods that are like floating. A lot of times I'll kind of think about how long it's taken my arrow to get, say it's having to travel 100 yards, how long that impact's going to take. Say it's 1 second, and I'll watch that floater, and then I'll kind of count, okay, 1/1000, that's where it is, and that kind of gives me an idea of how much I have to hold off.
If you're listening to this and you're like me and you're learning, just learn how to shoot with the bubble in the center. I'm going to stick with shooting with the bubble in the center for quite some time, and then we'll figure out this stuff later on. But
It's all applicable, though. I think people listening should take away from this. If you're learning a new craft or a new trade, do your due diligence in multiple areas. Read up on it. Do research on buying the proper equipment, and then obviously do some research on how to use that equipment. But then also find the right person to teach you the in the field practicality of that.
and then practice your ass off.
Yeah, and then dive in there and put your time behind it. I mean, that's what you have to do. And it was you've been the perfect example for people who are interested or thinking about archery for the first time, because you went on that first hunt with me. Everything was more or less laid out for you.
100%. 100%.
I was there. I went there for twice as long so that I could be with you for the time that you were there, because you weren't able to be there the whole time. And then obviously with Taylor and Tyler, we had two good guides who were able to kind of call for us and stuff to where I could be with you and navigate and really talk about, here's where your shot's going to be. We need to set up here. The wind's blowing this way. He's going to come up this draw most likely.
And it went even before that. Like the night before, you're like, hey, this is where we're going to be going. Like, the stage was set, so I could already kind of think in my head, like, these are the things I'm probably going to encounter. So, it gives you the foresight, like, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. This is what I should expect. It was
well, that's what you're used
setup.
to in your old field, right? I mean, it's not like they would just say, hey guys, load up. you're just going into this place, and we'll kind of tell you what we want you to do when you're there. Like,
It's not advisable.
yeah. So I think to be able to do that for you, you had a completely different mindset there. I mean, you were as relaxed and cool. I mean, you almost made me feel inferior because of how I was for my first 10 years as a bow hunter. I'm like, wait a minute. This guy comes face to face with a big old black bear and, you didn't even crack a sweat. You just made...
Because I didn't think about it till weeks later. I'm like, hold on a second. That thing was walking at us. What if I had missed?
Yeah.
I didn't think about that literally until later. I was just like, oh, Dudley said reload. Here he comes. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. I mean, you made an ideal shot, super cool, super collected. And that whole hunt, everything, I mean, you were exactly how I would expect you to be, with just game face and game time scenario, which I think is probably an important subject to talk about. I think a lot of your listeners really like the personal motivation you give them, but also they really like kind of some of your true to life, I guess, points of view. And one of those is how to perform in the moment versus how to, there's people that can practice in the backyard, but sometimes those people, when it comes to like game time, they just unravel and the wheels come off.
Well, it's because the backyard isn't actually your baseline. And that's what I found over time in the military. There are people who can perform well on a paper range who fall apart in a three-dimensional range. And we see it inside of the SEAL teams as well, too. Like, we have the whole broad spectrum of human nature. We have all the same problems. We have all the same experiences. Not everybody's, this stereotypical, Hollywood movie brave soldier running at the gunfire. Some people perform really well. Some people freeze. And they can, what I think we do a good job of in the SEAL teams is we try to teach them and train them really hard so they can get out of that frozen moment and they can continue to drive forward. And then once they have more experience, it's less likely to happen. But yeah, your baseline is not the backyard. And that's one thing I firmly believe in, is going out and stressing yourself. I actually did a podcast about the stress inoculation stuff.
Yeah, it was great.
We did. And even, people who like to use long range marksmanship as an example, you can go to 1,000-yard range and put up a target at 1,000 yards, and you can take all the time in the world and get your heart rate low and wait for the wind and then get behind the gun and make perfect shots. But what if you just had to move and you're hauling butt to get up on a high ground position because you're trying to cover people that are being shot at, and when you get there, your heart rate's at max, and your shooting position is not level, and you're aiming, you're laying downhill and it's not perfect, and it's raining on you, and you have to combine all of those things. That's where you find out where your baseline is.
Sounded really fun.
Well, I've never...
I would love to be at that baseline.
I equate it to, I've never done anything in my life that truly has mattered with a resting heart rate. That's
a good point.
Almost all the moments that have really counted, my heart rate has been near maximal or definitely beyond resting. And in the backyard, when you're shooting paper, where's your heart rate? It's resting. Mm-hmm. So you have to figure out a way, and sometimes it's just go do some sprints and get your heart rate up, because when you can hold your pin perfect and then you just go do something really physically hard and you're like, I can't hold my pin on the target anymore. There's your actual baseline.
What do you recommend for people that are maybe the military guys that are doing some of these, special op type training things where they're, I think you've told me stories in the past about there's times where people are completely capable of being, like, say, on a SEAL team, but once they're there and they're in that buds, they almost just underperform because they're so focused on like trying to make it that I think they're more worried about not making it than they are about just focusing on task on hand.
Yep.
What do I do right now so that I can still make it through this day or this hour or this exercise? Whereas instead of them thinking for the entire span of time, I always found that as a competitor, it's like, if I wanted to win Shooter of the Year, which like my first year, my goal was Rookie of the Year. But that goal is one that I mentioned on January 1st, and I never thought about it again until I won that.
Yeah.
Because it was like, okay, I want rookie of the year. What do I need to attain that? And it's like, I need to do this, this, and this at every tournament. So, okay, each tournament one at a time.
Yep.
Let me just start to stack these together. So it's,
And you could take that even farther. You could go an arrow at a time.
Yep.
So the answer to your question, to me, having gone through Buds as a student and then going back as an instructor, I'm really glad in hindsight. I didn't want to go as an instructor when I did, but I'm glad that I was able to make sense of the journey, because when you're going through, it's just like, what's going on? It just seems completely random. And then you see behind the curtain into the wizardry shop, and you're like, oh, it's a 3-ring binder. You pull out every day, and it's like at 8 o'clock, we're going to do this. It's very structured.
Yeah.
But what you see the most of is people quitting and people failing. And the whole purpose of Buds is to drive you towards where you're the least comfortable. And that could be in the water. It could be from exhaustion. It could be from being hungry or fear, whatever it might be. That's the whole point, is to drive you to that point, apply a little bit more pressure, and watch what you do. And it is very physically hard, but every student that shows up is physically capable of making it, because they have to take all these tests. Nowadays, it's very selective just to get a slot at Buds. You have to go to like a 16-week course to compete for the billets.
Yeah.
And still, 75 to 85% of the people don't make it. So they're physically capable enough. And if you lined up an entire class, like my class had 180 people the first day. If you would have lined us up, physiologically, there'd be some difference in height, and maybe somebody would be 15 pounds heavier than the lightest guy. I was 155 pounds in Buds. And there was 18 of us when we graduated out of those original 180. And there were guys who were there stronger than me, faster than me, fill in the blank. Like I've always said, I'm a C across the board, just average. But the difference is, in what I saw as an instructor, if I wanted to get people to quit, I would try to get them to focus on a huge world, like as wide, open that aperture up. My first technique, always, like, can you really do this for 6 months? I mean, this really hurts right now. Think about how long I'm going to have you here doing this, and just try to get them to think huge. Or to go back to the archery, to try to get you in your first tournament, on every shot, I would try to get in your head, be like, hey, don't mess this up, because if you do,
Rookie of the year.
Rookie of the year is on the line. And I would get in there in your ear every shot, especially if you had a bad one, and be like, oh, there's no way you're going to be able to recover from this. But that's what you would do as an instructor, is you would look for different mechanism, right? A different goal, but it's the same concept. I would try to open their world up and just get in there and just create all kinds of mischief. And the second you could get them to think about how long they were going to be cold, or how long they were going to be awake, or how much it sucked, your odds of getting that individual to quit were astronomically higher. And then the ones who I have found to be the most successful, and the strategy that I personally used, because it got explained to me by guys who were farther on in training, especially around Hell Week, the 7-day Hell Week of the first phase of training. They're like, dude, just take it one day at a time. Take it an hour at a time. Just get from breakfast to lunch, and then lunch to dinner, and then dinner to mid-rats, which is a meal in the middle of the night. And by doing that, it's amazing what you can tolerate when you know it's going to end, and just focus on one day at a time. And I actually have a lot of people who do hit me up and ask me for advice when it comes like, hey, I want to be fill in the blank in the military, or SWAT cops, or anything that has a selection course. And the advice I always give people is just take it one day at a time. And if that actually seems overwhelming, chunk it into whatever you can take. Make it to a meal. Take it for an hour. I've just seen, the diving test that I administered, you had 4 attempts at it. And if you didn't pass on the 4th attempt, the odds of you continuing through training are not in your favor. So these guys would fail on their 4th attempt, and you're talking grown men. And I was I'm in my early 30s at this point. I was still a kid. And these guys would come up crying. Like, this is all I've ever wanted to do in my entire life. Their dream is completely crushed. And it's like, hey, get out of the pool and check in as a failure. See you later. Because in that diving test, again, I can control when you breathe and I can tie knots, but we teach you all of these fundamentals, and all you have to do is apply the fundamentals and stress. And how do you do that in that test? You don't think about the 20-minute test. You think about what's happening in that moment and what are the fundamentals and the procedures I need to do to remedy the problem, and then you continue on. And the next thing you know, the test is over. And that's how I used to brief the students. Like, listen, we've given you have an open book test. You have all of the things that you need to do. I can take your hose away from you, and sometimes you can breathe and sometimes you can't. But that's the purpose of this test, is to stress you out. It has nothing to do with diving. And it was tough, but being able to see that, what happens when people think too big, or what happens when they deviate from those fundamentals time and time again in those stressful environments, and then having the ability to think back in my career for the evolutions that didn't make sense in training, and now seeing why we do them, and now understanding that, yeah, the guy who's coming up, he's crying and he's crushed, probably one of the best guys you'll ever meet, but we're not looking for good guys. We're looking for people who can perform.
Well, when we did our elk hunt, I don't know if you knew this, but when we would talk about where we're going to go, I would never say, well, we're going to park here and then we have to go 15 miles to the thing. I would always say, let's start here. Let's get down to that first meadow. And then we keep working around. And even that day where we did that really long walk, it just kept picking that next spot that was easily obtainable in your mind instead of saying, okay, we've got 3 more hours to walk. And you don't even think about it. Like, before you know it, you're at that point and you're like, where's the next point? I remember one time, I can't remember who it was, but it was a friend of mine was talking about something that he had to do to qualify for something. And he had to tread water for a real long period of time. And I can't remember what it was for, but I remember he said on multiple times he failed being able to tread water for that amount of time. And he said he was just really frustrated. And he's like, I don't know how I can do this. And he said that he ended up having an instructor pull him to the side, because I think the instructor really wanted him to be able to complete it. And he said, my tip to you is quit looking at the clock.
100%.
He said, go find someone in the pool and start a conversation. So he just told me, he goes, literally the next time I was up to attempt it, he's like, I just got in the water, started treading, went over to a couple people, and the 3 of us just started having this conversation. Next thing you know, it's like, dude, time's up, get out of the pool. And he's like, holy cow, that was a completely different experience.
And physiologically, nothing changed in his body.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. I mean, in most of the time, what I found, the instructors do want the students to pass. Like, I tried to give every brief that I could leading up to the pool week stuff, that big test that I gave. But I mean, you see guys struggling, you stay late, you try to help them out. You want to see them get through. Mm-hmm. The dangerous part you can get to is, okay, this guy's awesome, so I'm going to help him out a little bit, and then you round an edge out in one of the tests and you make it easier. And that's just a long-term recipe for a disaster. You're better off giving them the advice. And if they can't figure it out, they got to go. Yeah. And then in that particular environment, other people's lives will be on the line. It's never that guy who ends up getting killed. It's always that guy does something stupid.
For someone he should be supporting.
Correct. And some of the best people in the world, those are the ones who end up paying the price for it. And it's tough to stomach, especially when you can look back and you're like, I could have done something about that and I didn't. So it's an interesting environment for sure. But I think being used to dealing with those stressful environments, it definitely helped me in Alberta, but also, like I said, I didn't think about what would have happened if I had missed that bear until weeks later. But I'm used to being in environments that are like that have consequence to it. And for me, you develop not a level of comfort, but you're just used to what it feels like. You have enough experience under your belt that it doesn't unravel you.
Yeah, and then having someone next to you too. If you have someone next to you that's in panic mode, then it's hard not to be in panic mode. At that point, you're almost having to go way over, and you're having to calm everybody down. So I think if I would have looked at you and been like, holy crap, it's a black bear, dude, go. If I would have been in that and then that rush scenario, I almost think we could have easily ended up having like what you had happen on your first elk hunt.
I don't want to talk about it.
I know. But I think all that stuff plays in to performance. Now, for me, I always felt like I was better at making it to the next level. I have a lot of people come to me and say, okay, I'm shooting local competitions, I'm shooting regional competitions. I really want to become a pro. Like, how do I make that step? And I think there's a lot of different ways to make the step. The way that worked for me is I literally just jumped in. And I knew that technically I wasn't good enough. I knew that I was not going to be good enough to do well there if I shot how I always shot. But I also knew myself well enough as a competitor, at least me, and I knew that I wouldn't like getting beat bad. So I knew that most likely I would elevate my game just because of the fact I would want to get back within the pack. And that's what happened. I went to one tournament and bombed, and then I'm just like, okay, this is over. Like, that's not me. I don't want to be in that position. So then all of a sudden, just my game went to a whole new level because I forced myself into an uncomfort zone.
Well, you threw yourself into a small pool.
Yeah.
And then I was going to say the same thing. That's why in the military, when you have the budgets, you're constantly searching out like world champions. Like if we were getting ready to do training for like rock climbing, for example, we'd sit around and be like, who is the best in the world? And there were some really good climbers in the teams, but they would just, you can't compete with somebody who climbs full time.
Yeah.
So we would go and just get humbled. I remember climbing one time in Idaho. I was a lead climber, so we were putting our own protection into the rock and climbing up above it. And there's nothing really that evaporates confidence more than being 15 feet above the last piece of protection that you put in, and you're questioning whether or not you actually put it in right. So I remember I'm sitting up there and I'm just like, God, like just fully exposed, because then you fall 15 feet from above, then 15 feet past, and then you hope that the thing catches. So you can take a nice little whipper. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm trying to keep my world small. I'm just look at the crack, just find something that can go in the crack. And from just over my shoulder, I smell a cigarette. And I look over, and the guy that we were climbing with is in tennis shoes, shorts, and a T-shirt with no protection whatsoever, Spider-Manning right up next to me. Pulls a cigarette out of his mouth. He's like, taps it on the rock. He's like, you got to put one right there. I was like, get away from me. You are freaking me out. We're 100 feet off the ground. He's just scrambling. I'm losing my marbles trying to keep it together. I was like being around those people, but I would watch how those guys packed their backpacks. I would watch how they picked a route to like go up a hill. I would look at them before they started to climb and like kind of just get an idea of how they were assessing what they were getting ready to do. And then I would start doing that stuff. And the next thing you know, you're getting way better at climbing. And then you go find another guy who's an expert. And we would do that with shooting, with, every skill set that we had. We would seek out the best people in the world. And I think the best thing that people can do if they constantly want to improve is never be the best person in the room. Always go out and find somebody who can crush you and then spend time with that person, because you're going to get better.
Oh, yeah.
But most people, well, I don't know, maybe not most people. A lot of people that I've seen, they kind of don't want to be around that person because it sucks on the ego to finish last. But then you don't realize you'll go back to your own pool and people are going to be like, what's going on? You got to throw yourself in that little pool.
Yeah, there's so many top pros that I've worked with that come to points in their career where they really struggle. And then they'll come to me and they'll ask me like on the side for advice. And normally I give them 2 times where I'll give advice, and then if by the next tournament they're not applying it, then it'll go a short amount of time and they'll come back. And then finally, after the second time, I just let them know, I'm like, listen, you don't want to accept what you're being taught. You're just trying to find an easy excuse of why you're not performing, but you're not really willing to dig down to the core of it. Some people can't put their ego far enough to the side to like literally almost go back to a method that's almost so basic. They feel like I think a lot of people feel like their technique gets better than basics, and I'm just a total like nut and bolt fundamental stack these square blocks or put these 4 colors in the crayon box. Like I'm really all about systematic steps that are super basic but put you into a foundation and a form to where if you have one thing break down, you can identify it fast enough. And a lot of people that are doing something, they become experts, quote unquote, they almost feel like they can't, like they're too good to be at that basic of a system. And I really think the core to everything, swinging a baseball bat, golf, archery, shooting a gun, probably, even just like climbing, like when we did those long walks and stuff, some people that were with us were really hurting, and I just felt like I've never been taught how to do that, but I just, I was just putting one foot in front of the other and trying to make sure that I had like good basic walking and climbing form.
Yeah.
And I was able to get through it without, blowing myself out. And I think so many people try to overlook the basic details, and they try to make it so much, more complicated than what it really is. But the best students I've had are the ones that accept the basics and
Just do what your teacher says. That's literally like, you do this. Okay. Like, I don't need to recreate the wheel. But, same thing, fundamentals when it comes to shooting. I've pulled the trigger on a gun probably 100,000 times without a bullet in the chamber. We would go back and just practice putting your hand on the holster, getting used to that motion of where it's going to be. Then getting it out of the holster and presenting to a target. Then as you're presenting to the target, rolling the hammer back. We were shooting SIG 226s. They're double action or single action. And literally just practicing that motion and click. All right, no round. Put it back in the holster. Dry firing. Just getting used to your sight alignment, pointing at the most boring target in the world, a black dot on a wall, and just practicing what it feels like to pull the trigger properly. And then you go out and you shoot. But we would start, I think almost every high-speed shooting school that I've ever been to started off with dry firing.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you really want to see people, if they have their fundamentals down, what we would do is we'd throw dummy rounds in their magazines. Even guys who are going super fast, they'd be coming up, boom, 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 click, and their gun would drop, and it shouldn't drop. I'm like, dude, you're making it work, but your fundamentals are garbage. Like, you need to go back down and you need to rebuild it back up, because you shouldn't have that crazy slap of the trigger. I'm sure you see, I am so upset at myself for the video opportunities that I missed when we did that hunting trip in Montana. Bless his heart. My uncle is amazing, but I saw some stuff that I couldn't do anything for about 5 minutes because I was blinded by the tears running down my face. I was laughing so hard. But I can only imagine what you've seen as far as like jerking stuff, people just smashing the trigger down. I gave him the silverback and he shot the ground 6 feet in front of him. It was amazing. Of course, I turned the video on right after the arrow went off because I didn't think that was going to happen. But again, now he has a silverback, loving it. He said he's shooting the best groups ever. And the conversation I had with him was like, yeah, you're going back to the fundamentals. He was getting away with it because he was shooting at shorter distance, but that distance was hiding a crazy flaw in those fundamentals. But he didn't want to see it, or he didn't see it because of the release that he was using or the setup that he had. Yeah. But again, back to the fundamentals.
We're talking about the release aid is what you actually hold in your hand that actually releases the string. It's like a mechanical device that you hold in your hand, and the silverback is one that I make and sell that I started Andy on, and it pretty much forces you into learning an unanticipated surprise shot. It would almost be like, I don't know, what would it be? It would be like it'd be like having a pistol.
It's like having a magazine and you know that you have 10 rounds, but 2 of them are dummy rounds.
Yep.
So it forces you every time because at some point you're going to pull the trigger and it's not going to go off. So it forces you, you're like, okay, don't anticipate. And you have great groups because at some point in time it's just going to go click and you don't want to be the guy that has the gun drop.
Yeah,
so it forces you
to not flinch the trigger. Correct. But it shoots every time as long as you pull through the shot. You have a safety that you hold down when you draw it back or when you let the bow back down.
Which is what he forgot to do.
Yeah. But, when you hold the safety and draw back, then once you get to full draw and you kind of line everything up right and you're aiming, you'll let off the safety. And then you continually build pressure onto the device by pulling your elbow behind you, and you're dynamically pulling through the shot. So it would be equivalent to having a rifle trigger to where if you punched it, like if you just swatted at the trigger on the rifle, it would not fire. But if you continually and slowly pulled in one continual slow motion, it would fire. And that's what this release does. So it identifies when people start having anticipation, like people start freezing off the target, or people start swinging their aiming dot past the target, trying to hit the trigger as they're going by, like drive-by shooting. It's not going to let you do that. So it identifies those flaws, which I think changes archers altogether, because you learn a fundamental from the very beginning. That's something that it teaches you things in your brain that I think are so easily to not understand. A lot of people just think pin has to be on the target, then I hit the trigger. And, those little keywords like hit the trigger.
I mean, it works at 7 yards.
Yeah.
If you're shooting at something big, but I mean,
people come unglued once it is in a moment of truth.
Yeah.
And you just can't do that. You have to be able to perform in those environments. And I think just having things that teach fundamentals and just super slow, methodical rounds, and even, like you said, for you, dry firing, pistol dry firing, obviously as soon as someone on your team got to where they sucked at shooting, you'd be like, let's go back to this.
Yeah.
How do you raise the gun? How
generally
do you
was you're fired, leave your stuff here. But I mean, the guys were skilled at that point, but even at the apex, it's all built on those fundamentals. And the best shooters I've ever seen would dry fire. I know a guy who literally just had a 5-pound weight and he would use it just to practice his draw and presentation. I'm like, you're out of your mind. But he was a machine.
Yep.
Not only on the range, but when it counted. His movement was always the same, and it couldn't have been more efficient. There was nothing left he could have trimmed out of his movement.
Well, I think you've heard on my podcast, the best year I ever had was a year that I was really, really busy at work. And I worked for an archery company, and I shot on the U.S. team at the time. And I was shooting a lot and working a lot. And when I came home, since I was doing international competitions, when I came home, there was so much work that I really couldn't practice. And all I could do is try to catch up on my phone calls, catch up on my cold calls. So I would just sit there with a string and my release aid and just literally just shoot this little piece of string in my office while I had my headset on or my speakerphone on. And I was just closing my eyes and letting people talk and just envisioning holding my pin on that target, and I would almost be envisioning scenarios that I would foresee coming at that next event. I'd be like, okay, next event's going to be in Poland. I know the finals are set out on this dock. This is what they're going to look like. Right now, so-and-so's shooting good. I'm probably going to end up meeting him in the medal match. So I would take myself into that scenario, and I'd say, okay, I'm standing at the front of the pier, target's at the end of the pier. I'm feeling the breeze in Poland, just coming down to one arrow left, And I literally would create these scenes to where sometimes when I went there, I almost remembered telling myself, like, you've already been here. Like, sometimes my imagination of the scenes I would set, just out of chance, they would...
Almost felt like deja vu.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
There were certainly times where I'm like, well, shit, this isn't how I thought of it. I was supposed to be out there. Now I'm eating pizza on the sideline watching these two knuckleheads shoot in the finals. But no, a lot of times it would be that way. I remember one time I was shooting against a really good archer. Him and I were kind of number one, number two at the time. And I remember we got into the finals together, and he looked at me and he goes, I think he said something like, good luck. But he said it kind of in a smart ass way. And I remember looking at him, I think he might have said something like, good luck, hope you do well. And for whatever reason, I was in one of those deja vu moments. I had already kind of, everything I'd played out in the semifinals and in my first medal matches, like my, kind of the semi-medal match, everything had just played out so exact to like what I had created in my mind, to where when I was in that situation and he said that to me, I remember looking at him, I said, I already won this one. And he goes, what? And I said, I feel like I've been here before. I already know what happens.
That had to have scrambled his eggs.
It did. He kind of like, and I think just because it's not like, there's times where you say that and you're trying to get into someone's head.
Yeah.
But I think the way that I said it and how fast I said it, he knew that, like, he didn't.
Yeah, it was game over.
Yeah, I don't think he thought I was like coming up with that as a comeback. He genuinely, that was like a genuine response, and he picked up on it that way, and he was like, "What the hell?" And yeah, and I ended up winning the thing, and I remember just thinking, yeah, I feel like I've totally done this already.
So it was just you two shooting.
Yeah, once you get into the finals.
So do you guys stand side by side as an arrow for arrow, or how do they do it?
Yeah, they've done it differently over the years. Some years you would shoot 3 arrows. Some years you shoot one at a time and alternate. You'll alternate back and forth. It depends how far down you get into the medal matches, and then now that they're televising a lot of archery stuff, they're milking it out more for TV versus
you gotta sell soap, man.
Yeah, 10 years ago when I was doing it, it was much different. So sometimes they were just trying to get people out of there before it got dark.
Let's go ahead and wrap this up, boys.
Yeah, let's get this over with. But you're normally standing going arrow to arrow with that person, and there's a spotter there calling them out, and the crowd's kind of cheering, and they're saying 10, 9, and then match is tied, and they're talking through this whole thing. So you pretty much know exactly where you stand the whole time. And honestly, for me, I was never really 100% focused on, like, I think when I first started getting into medal matches, I was more concerned with not looking stupid than like winning. Yeah. And I think that was preventing me from winning, because I would go out there and I'd be like, don't shoot an 8, or something. Because I'm thinking now everybody's watching and someone's going to be like, I thought Dudley was good. And I was thinking more about that than thinking like eye of the tiger type stuff of just saying, okay, all I need to do is execute. And then it got to the point where as I matured as a competitor, and especially once I realized in the end, medal matches or championships, those things just come and go. They come and go all the time. In the end, no one's going to remember what I won. Most people don't remember what was won last year. I mean, like if you said who won the World Series last year, I'd probably remember the Cubs just because it was the Cubs. But you say 2 years ago, who's going to remember, right? So
I don't follow basketball.
I put so much emphasis on thinking that was like a major event, and I was more worried about underperforming early in my career, and I think that was a big mistake. Like looking back, I think if I could have gone there and just stepped to the line in the finals and said, okay, what got me here? Good shot execution got me here. Okay, what do I need for good shot execution? Toe the line, load the arrow, stance, grip, shoulder, anchor, peep, alignment, let off the safety, pull through. Finish the shot, and then as soon as that arrow goes off, whether they call 8, 9, 10, what got me to this line? Shot execution,
keep your world
stance,
small,
grip, shoulder.
I like the systematic approach to it. I still like the shot I took this morning. I still go through the same thing. Like I literally do. In my head, I'm like, I have my stance set up. Got my grip, pulled, anchor, take my time, drop down into the peep, and then I'm literally just like, don't have a bad follow through. Just
pull through.
Pull through. I mean, for me, it works. It helps. I think it helps settle me a little bit.
Yeah, and he shot his first whitetail out of a tree this morning, everybody.
First shot out of a tree.
And man, was it a smoker shot, too. Oh,
she helped me out. a little bit.
Well, I told you that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Which, again, that's what's cool about having some of your first, like, game time experiences with someone that can help you and communicate, because I went out the first night and you guys, we only had 2 camera guys here, so just the way it ended up, you said you guys just go, or John, just go out on your own. Yeah. So I kind of thought,
which is a mistake, everybody.
I'm like, okay, this is gonna be fun. So yeah, I've unleashed mayhem, and I told you, I said, and actually when I made the first deer that I shot, I recognized their reaction. Down here in the South, the deer are a little more flinchy, and certain areas and certain animals are flinchy. So you have to start to understand like reaction time and if they're dropping and jolting. So after the first one that I saw react that way, I thought, okay, these things are ducking the string a little bit. So then the second one that came out, I kind of focused on aiming just a little bit lower. And when I shot that one, I'm like, okay, that's money. They're dropping, you know. So by the time, and all three shots I had, all three were smoker shots.
Yeah,
they were all recovered.
Textbook.
But once you and I got in the tree yesterday, I told you, I said, listen, don't aim halfway up.
Oh, if I had done that this morning, it would have over her back by 8 inches.
Exactly. I just said, okay, listen, if it's like 15 yards or less, you can probably aim right at that halfway point, but for sure bottom third. But I told you anything 20, 25 or further, just literally have your pin in the armpit and they'll drop right into that arrow. And then worst case scenario is if they didn't react, it goes right under them, right? And you're fine. But yeah, that doe came out for you this morning. And I just, when they were watching, they're like, look how low this doe dropped. And you had a perfect arrow. And I said, well, I told them to aim in the armpit. I said, so back the video up. I said, put your pointer on the armpit. Yeah. And I said, then play it forward and see where his arrow goes. Yeah. And that's exactly.
I broke with it just on the base of the fur. Just a smooth break. And just, that thing was.
Dice City.
Yeah. It was crazy. But I have never heard a deer, what do you guys call it? Howling or blowing?
Yeah. A doe blows. A doe blows or snorts.
But she stayed, which is what, and she was looking at us.
Yeah. She probably didn't get probably with the direction of your wind, she probably didn't smell you. Like a lot of times animals want confirmation in multiple ways. Yeah. If they see movement, that sometimes their tolerance to movement, they'll look at you and they'll realize, okay, what is this? Do I think it's danger? Yes or no? If they smell you, it's an instant identifier. Like hearing,
you're gone. They're gone, right?
If they smell you, they know that's human. If they hear something, they look. Then they're trying to get the visual, and if all of a sudden they see a person or they see a figure, and they're like, okay, 2 legs going down to the ground and a big round thing on the top, that's a human. So they get that second confirmation, then they're gone. A lot of times when they only have one confirmation, like one type of trigger, they'll sit there and they're still curious. So like when you told me she was trying to circle you, she wanted that second confirmation to know whatever I see up in that tree, which is you and a camera guy behind you, she knows that hasn't been here before.
Don't forget my vest.
Yeah.
It's sassy.
You have to wear blaze orange here, and even if you're bow hunting in Georgia, since it's rifle season as well. So she was trying to circle around you to get your scent, and once she would have got that, it would have been over. Yeah. But you weren't making enough noise to where she could identify noise, and probably because your back was to a solid tree, she couldn't pick out head or limbs. Yeah. So she wasn't being able to identify like silhouette type.
Well, I was trying to watch her, like keep my head down and watch her out of the corner of my eye too, instead of staring right at her. I was blown away because she had gone all the way out, and Caleb was like, "Hey, she's coming back." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, she was curious. She knew she heard something or saw something new, but she was probably like, "What is that? Is that a big freaking turkey up there? Is that a bear?"
It is not a big turkey up there.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll carry a turkey call with me in my release pouch because, when there's times where deer are coming through and they're looking up and spotting you, and this is a pretty good tip for if there's any hunters listening. If you ever go to an outfitter's place where they have stands set up and, you come for your week of hunting, and if you go there and all of a sudden as deer and animals are walking by, they keep looking up at your tree, it's obvious that that stand has been in that tree forever. And like every knucklehead that wanted to like blow his grunt tube for the first time at a buck walking by, or up there smoking a cigarette or chewing gum or digging into a bag of galactic pork rinds. Yep.
Which are delicious.
Yeah. Any of that stuff, you can realize they start to associate there's a person up there. So I always carry a single reed diaphragm call with me. And I've had times where if deer stop and they look at me and they're like kind of doing the head bob, I'll just like let out a few little kikis, because turkeys stay in trees too, like in Iowa and a lot down here.
I did not know that. I thought they were on the ground.
No, well, they roost in trees, and they'll go up in trees if they're ever scared. So a lot of times just having a little kiki can have those things just kind of break their train of thought just long enough for you to be able to get a shot. They'll be like, wait a minute, am I missing something here? Is this a dang turkey in a tree? Like I didn't think that, but I think
You're definitely the animal whisperer.
the animal whisperer.
When that cow elk came up on us in Alberta and you got her to start eating by pulling on because you had your goofy hat on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a technique that I do. If you're ever, it's a technique that I do. If you start to get in a herd of elk, as long as obviously with elk, if they smell you, it's over with. But elk are loud because they're big, so they start to accept. They accept noises, and when you're sitting there and you're cow calling, they obviously are looking, thinking, okay, there's a cow over there. So one thing that I started to do is when elk eat, they'll kind of turn their mouth to the side and they'll grab on a branch and then they'll rake the leaves out and then they'll chew on them, and they'll grind them. So you can kind of hear that. You can hear them kind of chewing their cud. So I just got to the point where when I would get in close with elk, I would just strip that stuff off and then I would kind of grind it with my hands. And that one that came in, or she just happened to come by us, she looked at us, she was like 10 yards and she's like, oh man, what the hell is that? And she was like getting ready to blow the whole scenario. So I just kind of made just a little cow call, a little calf call, and then I kind of reached down where she couldn't see my hand and I kind of just stripped up and started grinding the leaves together, and she kind of like, next thing you know, she just went to eating.
She's like, oh, okay, cool.
And
I guess we're eating now.
I looked over at you like, didn't know I knew that trick, did you? And you just looked at me like, what the F?
I mean, the thing was standing close. I mean, as close as that front door, looking directly at us. I mean, I don't know what they can see, but yeah, you basically got her to start eating. She's like, yeah, what? All right, cool. Started. Unbelievable,
It
man.
worked out perfect.
I don't think there are many hunters who listen to my podcast, which is good because I wanted to ask you, because I get hit up. People make the mistake of asking me hunting questions, which don't waste your time, people. I don't know anything. I'm learning as I go. But I keep getting asked like a version of the same question. And it's like, what are the 3 things you need to start bow hunting? Absent the bow. Let's just assume that you have a bow and a way to shoot the bow. But like the 3 essential things, people are like, what do I need to get started? And I actually don't know what to tell them.
Like to go into the field, you think? Or?
Yeah, like if you had 3 things you need to have with you and then like 3 things that would be like awesome to have, like maybe it's a financial constraint or whatever it is, but like just basically the bare essentials, what do I need to bow hunt? Minus the bow, because we'll assume that that's...
Yeah, I think here's a really good tip. So I think there's a lot of hunters right now that are all about growing the sport and teaching. So I think a great way to start, if you're out there and you want to know how to get into it, you've got a bow, maybe you learn how to shoot. Honestly, the best thing you could do is call your local game warden. If you look in the hunting regulations, or you could even go on the website, like for example, in Iowa, you go on the Iowa DNR website and you can look up, county game wardens. And then I know like my county game warden in my area, his name is Craig Cutts. And he actually has people who he's met in Walmart and said, oh yeah, I'd love to do hunting. He's like, well, let me show you. And a lot of times those people that are passionate about it and the game wardens, they get a bad rap because people just think they're out there to bust you.
I was going to say, it seems like an odd person to recommend as an introduction.
I can tell you right now, I've gone way further in my hunting career by meeting the local game warden and talking to them. And, my local game warden, he has the keys to my place. He knows the code to get in, to literally get into like my farm. And, I just feel like having those people closer to you is an advantage because he's the first one to tell me, hey, they just changed this rule in the regulations. I probably would have never known about it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just from that, like me as a veteran hunter, I would say, there's advantages. But for a new beginner, he's going to be able to say, hey, there's a bow hunter's education class coming up next month at the Quabi State Park.
Which, if you hunt bow, like it was a requirement for Montana,
Right.
It's probably every state you have. There are some steps you have to take. You can't just go buy a bow and go out in the field.
Yeah, which is important. And I think and a lot of times if you go to that bow hunter's education class, you're going to meet that warden, because a lot of times the local game warden will come in for a certain aspect of
Makes
that
sense.
class. But if you just said, listen, I'm new, I have no idea where to start. Do you know someone that I can go to? Do you know someone that could help me? And there's you'd be surprised at how many, game wardens would probably say, I'll help you. Like, I'll take you out one day and teach you something. I'll take you onto some public land and give you some pointers. Otherwise, they may say, hey, there's a great shop right in town. The owner's name is Billy Bob. And, Billy Bob really likes getting new hunters in. He can give you some great pointers. He's got some great people in the shop that are probably be more than willing to take you out for your first time. And I think that's just a really, really good place to start. Otherwise, if you're someone, say you're in a city and you really don't have your own place necessarily to go, and you're in a city but you really want to do it, do some research and find an outfitter where, you might need to save up a little bit more to go on that hunt. But call that person and be really clear and say, listen, this is my first ever hunt. Like, is it possible for someone to be with me that first night? Have you hosted new hunters before? And I think you'll find those people. A lot of people are quick to want to show you what they know, and they're quick to want to share they want to like share how much knowledge they have on something. So I think they'll jump at that opportunity. But I think that's a great place to start. And I know it's polar opposite of what most people think. A lot of people like avoid, they'll see a game warden come down the road and, oh crap, and they'll like want to go the other way. Honestly, I've liked to just stop and talk to them and be like, hey, what are you seeing? You guys seen any good bucks? If they're like, yeah, deer on their feet right now, or it's been really slow, they're out there every day, all day. Like, that's their job.
Unless you're playing under the radar or doing something you shouldn't be, and you have nothing to worry about going.
Right.
I haven't encountered one in Montana, so I don't know if I've ever met a game warden.
Well, I can introduce you to one if you want.
It'd be interesting to talk to. I think people like that are a wealth of knowledge.
The longer I've been around like my local warden, I just keep telling them, like, man, if I was to read a book, like if you had a book of just like stories of a game warden, because he's about to retire.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, because when we drive around, well, just 2 days before I came here, I did a ride along with Craig. He picked me up at an hour before daylight. I was up, I had just podcasted and made a cup of coffee, and he texted me and said, hey, I'm getting ready to cruise a bunch of public roads. He's like, what are you doing? I just said, I just poured a cup of coffee. I said, come grab me at the top of the driveway. So I just jumped in, and we just drove our whole county at first light, just looking for different deer movement and stuff. And just him driving around, he's like, one time I had to set up on this guy on this road right over here. And I'm just like, dude, this is like storytelling time from a game warden is super cool. Like that,
My cousin told me about this, and maybe you guys, well, you probably don't. There's no elk in Iowa, is there? Are there?
not in the wild. But.
So apparently in Montana they have an elk dummy.
Oh yeah.
That like moves a little bit.
Yeah, robo elk.
Yeah, and the warden sits there, and people come by and they're like, "Oh damn, there's an elk!" They like throw their gun over their hood, and the warden's just like, "Come on over."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, some of the funniest videos at the Iowa Deer Classic, the Iowa DNR every year, they have these stuffed pheasants that they put in the ditch because you're not supposed to shoot out of your car, but like people just lose their freaking mind seeing like something out of the car window and they can't just follow the rules and get off the roadside. So there's just this montage. They have this video that's like just so long, and all it is just like surveillance video of people just riding up and just blasting the shit out of this stuffed freaking pheasant decoy in the ditch. And they've done the same thing with robo deer too. So yeah, I mean, they've got deer that are motorized. I actually have one. I bought one of the robo deer. In some states you can actually use.
oh, there's like a decoy.
Yeah. I use it as a decoy. You can move the head. You can move the.
No way.
Yeah, it's really cool. Some states it's legal. Some states it's not. I have to take the batteries out, like in Iowa. But I actually have a full mounted stuffed deer. When Rogan came hunting with me, he was laughing his ass off because I have two. I have a buck and I have a doe. And when the first one I got was a buck, and I always just called him Jethro. I don't know why, but then I got to the point where I'm like, I really want to have a doe too. So I got a doe, and so I called the doe Jethrina. And I remember me and Joe were like getting our crap together one morning, and I said, I think I'm going to bring Jethrina today. And he was just looking at me like, who the F is Jethrina? And he was out there, and Rogan, like any kind of gadget to him, he's like a gadget geek. But when I came out of that building with that freaking full stuffed doe, like up
Is
on
that the
top
picture you posted with him on your shoulders and you guys walking? Yeah.
Yeah. He was just like, what the hell is that? I'm like, it's Jethrina, dude. And he's like, he goes, I forgot what he said, but he just said, you deer hunters are some silly F's or something. I forgot what he said, but he's like,
He
you guys
does
are crazy.
he does like himself some gadgets.
He's a gadget
So
master.
speaking of 3 gadgets, like I said, we talked about the essentials or where to start. If you could buy 3 gadgets, what would they be? Like if you had the money, I would obviously assume you'd want people to put the money into good gear.
Yeah.
But if you had excess, what would you recommend? Like the 3 that are just crazy nice to have, but you actually don't need them at all. Like a rangefinder. Do you need one that compensates
Definitely
for angle?
need one.
No, what I mean that compensates for angle.
For sure. Like
Okay.
if you're an archer, a rangefinder is a must. I would almost say have a rangefinder before you even have binoculars. I would say having a good light, good headlamp, good light would be pretty important, and having a good knife.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you factored out like your bow equipment, I remember when I first started hunting, I was 10. My uncle would just drop me off in the tree in dark, and he'd say, well, I'll be back when I can. And, people ask how I sit all day. Well, I'm used to sitting until my uncle came back to get me. So sometimes that was the whole day. Even when I was 10, 11, 12, I'd just sit in that tree the whole time. But,
How much should people geek out on camo? Like, is that worth going down the rabbit hole? And
well, I think that there's certain camos that are super effective, especially if you're doing spot and stock stuff. It's always been weird to me. Like, there's been times where I'll go on a hunt. For example, I've been out to Montana a few times where ranchers, like, you'll see something, you'll go knock on a door, and the rancher will be like, yeah, come on, I'll show you how to get back there. I know how to sneak up on that muley buck. And you'll go out there and you're all camoed out and you're like really trying to sneak along, and then they're there in blue jeans and a flannel top and cowboy boots with a big freaking hat on, and they're just walking up there, and you get the shot anyway. No, it's a funny thing. I definitely like camo. I think there's camo patterns that are awesome. I mean, I'm really big into the Under Armour Ridge Reaper patterns. The Baron pattern, I think overall is the best pattern ever made. But I also think there's something to say about flannel and chainsaw gas smell on your gloves, because I've been with so many loggers that have shot massive animals just out there, chainsaw, and all of a sudden, a big old moose just came out of there and looked at me, and I don't know, flannel shirts, blue jeans, cowboy hats, and maybe a little chainsaw gas. That's pretty good camo too. I remember one time I was in Illinois, and it was right when wood burners came out. Everyone had the exterior boilers where they would just put logs in those little houses, and they would heat their whole house with a boiler.
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
Well, in the Midwest, they're pretty popular right now. It's like the size of an outhouse, but it's literally like...
Is it for homes that don't have a heater?
It is their heater.
Gotcha.
They
Okay,
cut
it's
their
like
own
an
wood.
add-on. Okay.
Yeah, they put wood out in there, and it's detached from the house so that it's cheaper for insurance. But it literally heats up, and they pump. They'll pump that. What it heats up, it'll heat up a boiler, and then they'll do their in-floor heating and stuff based off literally a fire burning.
No kidding.
Yeah, heater outside. And it works really good. But in the Midwest, so many people are using them that there's just constantly the smell of firewood floating around. So I remember I went with an outfitter one time, and everybody's like getting ready to go out, and this outfitter's like, all right, y'all, come on over here, everyone come around now, we're gonna do this every time before we go out in the stand. And he said, I call it smoking up. He's like, come on in. And he just piled up all these leaves and he lit them and he just smothered them all up. And he's like, now get down in there. And he's getting everyone down. And you literally walked out of there looking like a chimney sweeper. And that whole hunt, I never got smelled. I had deer walking down. Yeah, and they were just, you smelled so much like smoke. Like I think I might have just threw those clothes away after that hunt. And there's so many hunters that are focused on being scent free that there was people there that like keep their stuff in like Ziploc bags.
There's end caps at these stores. I mean, I've never bought it, but it's like the detergent, the deodorant. I was like, holy cow, the wipes.
There were people that were scent conscious freaks at this outfitters that were losing their gourd because they were like, I don't want to smell like anything. And he's like, smoke up now, get in there. And he'd just pile it up and just be like black smoke coming off the leaves. But it worked really good. It was a good technique. So I guess it was a pretty good cover smell.
I mean, even if you wash all your stuff in scent-free detergent and like once you start sweating, aren't you defeating the purpose? Yeah, I mean,
think of this bow right now. I've got my bow sitting here and it's laying on the couch. I'm like, I've just drank a pot of Blackbeard's Delight, and I've also just drank, I'm almost through that Fruit Punch Kill Cliff in there, and I'm touching my bow, and I'm going to, even if I go and I shower and I put my clothes in the wash and all that, this is still contaminated. Like right now, Hunter's walking around with my phone. I think you're doing a live feed. I don't know, but hey, everybody, if it's doing a live feed. My phone's obviously contaminated because Hunter wiped his butt a little while ago. Totally. Now he's running my phone.
Filthy little savage.
So I'm all about like not being downwind of an animal's nose. I just think that that's pretty important. I think taking precaution and trying to keep as much of your equipment away from contamination as possible is important because I think, if a deer smells you and if you smell 3 times more offensive.
Oh, for sure.
I think they're less acceptant of that. So I think minimizing that as much as possible is important. I always wash all my hunting stuff with just a scent-free detergent. Like I think I get like Tide Free or something. I don't spend money on scent-free detergents because I just get the completely unscented ones at Sam's Club or Costco or something, and that's all I've ever really used. But yeah, I don't know. I'm over the top when it comes to, I think, training and practicing and leading up to the, and maybe I might be a little bit over the top and eccentric when it comes to like stealth and noise and approach and like impacting my presence where I'm at. But in the same sense, there's other things that they're almost can't understand. It's like, well, why aren't you totally scent free?
Yeah.
Or why aren't you like really worried about that? I just feel like I pick and choose my battles, and I don't know. I guess I've had success doing it my way, and I'm usually not really spending time on scent-free products.
It's interesting how many of them are out there. I mean, they're certainly turning the lights on and off at the companies that are they're making them, pitching them to people. How much else do we want to tell people about the future?
I wouldn't tell them anything till
Can't
it's
tell them
happening.
yet? Damn.
No.
Sorry, people. We just teased you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, your sweatshirts came in.
They did.
And I'm actually upset that I'm here because those suckers. I've got one on my doorstep right now, and they look freaking awesome. Are they sold out?
They're close.
By the time this podcast is out, yours are going to be sold out.
I mean, as soon as I told you the quantity that I ordered, you just shook your head. I was like, damn it. I did the wrong thing again.
Yeah, you did. You totally did.
But like I said, Jon Snow was right. Winter's coming. So you need a hoodie. You
definitely need a hoodie. They're awesome.
Yeah,
they should be the same as this one.
I think I actually went with a little bit thicker. That one's polyester.
Did?
We went cotton polyester blend.
Oh, okay. You sneaky little devil.
Well, I could see snow already on the mountains by my house.
Oh yeah.
I'm sitting there looking at it like, yeah, we're gonna need to get some thicker layer on that thing.
Yeah. For all those watching live right now, we're actually podcasting for Andy's Cleared Hot podcast. And we've got some cool stuff coming out. I think
some cool stuff on the horizon too.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff coming, and I think Well, hopefully people aren't getting tired of hearing hunting. I'm a hunter, but I'm also I love so much of what you do on the practicality and just motivation and teaching the right ethics to people and just giving people a positive view on life approach. That's how I am too. I feel like everything I have in life has just come from getting up early, working hard, following through. You know, if I make a mistake, just tell people right away that it was my fault. Just own up to it. And you know, I think if people do that, like those of you listening, I think that's something that's really, really critical. You know, if you're trying to, there's a lot of people saying, how do I advance? Like think of some of your other podcast people are saying, how do I advance if our leader is,
Yep.
you know, maybe not leading the right way. And I think the fundamentals, just like we talked about fundamentals in shooting, I think the fundamentals of life are just, you know, following through, being there on time, owning up to your mistakes, and communication. I think if you can do those things right now, I know that for me as a boss with my employees, having good communication, clear and upfront, is just something that, you know, man, is that valuable with
It's
anybody.
not easy to do either.
Yeah.
Like the one thing I would add to what you're saying is I wish people would actively seek out difficult things.
Yep.
It's almost actually, I don't know why I love bow hunting so much, but I absolutely love it. I think a large portion of it is because it's so freaking hard.
Yeah.
And it's just humbling to go, and it's just you and the pin. Why I want the arrow go where I want it to. And just you have to practice. You could blame the bow, which I did for a short period of time. We don't have to talk about that though. But I mean, it's hard and it's challenging. And you know, having employees, how easy would it be not to have good lines of communication and not address things up front and not set the standards? And then what ends up happening is later on down the road, you have a problem. That's all I would add to everything you said. It's just people. I wish people would go and seek out difficult things, because if I look back at my life, all of the stuff of value didn't come easy.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that came easy, I mean,
You forgot about it.
it's valueless.
Yeah.
You know, to a degree. So
I agree.
yeah, it's maybe on that note we should go out and let's go do some shooting.
Yeah, let's go launch. We're gonna do some kill cliff trick shooting.
And then
We're gonna
later,
try to mix drinks with bows, arrows, and cans.
And then later today we still got to do the fletching the arrows too.
Oh yeah.
Do a little.
So you're already building your own stuff. That's just.
That shot I took today was on my arrow.
Oh,
that
that's
I made.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, you built that arrow.
I did.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good. So, oh yeah, show that knife.
Ooh. So for the audio only crowd, you're missing out on this, but this is the
This was
knock on kitchen blade. Look at this bad boy.
HMC.
Hunter, put your finger on the table.
Do
Hunter
not-
wants to go to France with us, and I told him he can come, but I want to test this knife on the first digit of his index finger.
He thought about it still.
He did actually think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, right on, man. Let's. I'm bringing the podcast stuff. We need to do one from a tent in France covered in snow
we're going to do that.
from the same sleeping bag.
Yeah, I want to. And actually, what you said right there, that's why I want to do this trip. There's a lot of stuff here that I'd like to hunt in December, and that's actually really good to hunt in December. But this is totally outside of my realm, and I'm actually going there expecting to be. I'm tall, so my digits.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like 8 foot tall.
My digits get cold really fast, so actually being somewhere where if I get cold, the only way we're gonna not be cold is making a fire or snuggling. So I'm looking forward to the challenge of it. I mean, I'm going there expecting there to be some misery to it, and I think that's what's gonna make it epic.
Have you spent a lot of time hunting in the snow?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
One of my favorite trips that I did, I started my career at Team 5. We were a cold weather team. I went to Kodiak twice for the full month-long experience. Absolutely love that environment. I mean, it'll crush you.
Yeah.
If you make some mistakes, you're going to die real fast. But, I mean, as far as natural beauty, I mean, come on. Like, that trip we're going to go on is going to be, the cool factor is off the charts, whether we see a ShamWow or not. I mean, it'll be amazing for sure.
Yeah, I think last year I hunted the last day of season. For whatever reason, I just told myself, I'm like, it's the last day of season. It's been a really good season. I actually didn't even have a buck tag left. I did have a doe tag, but I'm like, I'm just going to go out. And I told myself I'm going to go for the whole day. So I went in dark and then got in there, and then I hunted dark to dark on the last day of season, and literally got up there. I think it was -4 and just sat in one little ball and just froze my nuts off and just absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
You know, it was awesome. I saw a lot of deer go by, and saw turkeys, deer, squirrel, like everything was out there. It was so crisp, and sound just carried like crazy, and it was just amazing. But it was I would say it was misery with beauty at the same time. It was cool.
Yep.
And that's what I'm expecting where we go. And yeah, that'll be cool. So
That should be a killer trip. But yeah, just the experience itself. To go from Alberta to some mountains in Montana to I don't think there's any mountains in Georgia. Haven't seen any since we've been out here. I think we gained 1 foot in about 5 miles
yeah.
to that terrain. I mean, I'm familiar with the Swiss Alps, so I'm sure the French Alps are going to be kind of like a Stairmaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Continual.
Punishing. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be punishing, but we'll have a great time. So let's wrap this sucker up. We got to go mix some drinks with our bows.
There's no better way to end it than that.
Raise some money for the Navy SEAL Foundation.
Heck yeah.
We're gonna
We're gonna be doing the Kill Cliff Bow Challenge. I should know more.
We got to invent it.
We have to invent it. We're going to invent it. Soon there's going to be a Kill Cliff Bow Challenge coming out. It's going to be based off of video submission, and there's going to be some parameters. And basically what we're going to do is approach the brands that we work with, and like for every video, it'll be $1 donated. So we'll pitch it to a bunch of different brands.
If you can do it, for every person that does the challenge, we'll get donations made, and then we'll also pin something up to where you can also make a donation as well. And hey, I would tell you too, a good way to get this within the community is to go around and say that you're going to do this, and have some local businesses maybe, say, if I end up doing this challenge, will you contribute? And, I think you'll find a lot of people that will do it, and I'm going to donate. I'm going to throw some money at the NSF.
Heck yeah. It's a good organization, man. And I think hopefully it gets people out, get their bows back in their hand, or drive some more interest. It should be a win-win for everybody, for the community, for the SEAL Foundation. It should be good.
All right, buddy.
Cool.
Let's go whack.
Let's go
stack
shoot.
Bows and snows.
Thank you again, everybody. I cannot say enough about the feedback and the questions and the posting on the social media platforms. I actually didn't realize or know how to search the hashtags and find all of the social media posts where you guys are putting up the cleared hot gear, whether it's a shirt or now the sweatshirts are coming down the line. It's awesome to see people repping that stuff in the wild, helping me spread the word. Can't do it by myself. So for everybody who's taken the time to write a review and tell somebody else about the podcast, really appreciate it. If you're new to it, do me a favor, go to iTunes and give it any type of review that you want, good, bad, or ugly. Reach out to me through any of the avenues on the website, the contact. Give me any feedback if you have it, any suggestions for making it better. And that's it. I don't know where it's going, but I'm having a blast.